Hey guys, Solid here and welcome back to another video. I hope you're all doing well. G'day guys, Future Solid here. Just wanted to warn you that this is quite a long video. So if you've got a short attention span, I've chucked some timestamps down below. And if that's not good enough, well, you've got bigger problems. I've had this video requested as some people are quite busy with their lives and they wanted a one-stop shop video with absolutely everything they needed to know as a beginner to get into off-road riding as soon as possible. So that's exactly what I've done, and let's get into it. So the first one is probably not as obvious as you would think, and it's not the motorcycle. The first thing I would say is think about where you are at in life. Think about your fitness and your health. Do you have physical injuries? Do you have illnesses to worry about? Do you have family obligations where you don't have as much time as, say, other people? What kind of things do you need to shape your adventure and dual sport riding around? If you've only got a couple of hours in the day because you've got family commitments on the weekend, that really determines what kind of riding you would do as, say, someone who's single with no family looking for adventure. You know, those are two different types of things, and you really need to assess what works for you. And really about, like I said, stacking the deck in your favor. Step back, think about what they can actually accomplish and look for something that will help them do that the best. So that's my first point, and enough ranting. Let's get into the second category. The next one still isn't motorcycles, and this will determine the motorcycle you get, and that's your style and your terrain that you're looking to ride on. So are you a guy that's looking to do long distance tours, tour up with your wife or your husband on the back, doing long tours through multiple countries? Or do you just have a couple of hours to spare in the day? You've got a trailer so you can put the bike on the trailer, head down to your local trails for a couple of hours and then come back to spend the rest of the day with your family. You're going to have two completely different bikes that are going to be suited for that scenario. So think about where you want to ride and how you're going to ride it. So finally, we reach the big one, and that's the type of motorcycle. I'm not going to tell you exactly which bike you should go for, as that's a personal choice, and we could be here for days, especially at the rate I ramble about motorcycles. But I will give you the three main categories, and I will tell you I've made a video completely just on this topic. I will link it above so you can go and watch that as well if you've got more time to educate yourself further. But basically there are three major categories that I wanted to cover of motorcycles when it comes to off-road riding. So the first of the category is adventure motorcycles. Now this is probably arguably the biggest category, and each category has a large spectrum of motorcycles in it. But this does have some defining features. These bikes are by far the most comfortable on the road. You can do big, long distances on them. You can take a pillion with you. They usually have multi-cylinder engines in them, and they're very comfortable, and they have a lot of technology. So they're great for riding on the road in heavy traffic, just for doing the day-to-day things and big, long touring jobs. Think of them like basically the motorcycle version of an SUV. They can do quite a lot of things, especially on the road, they're very capable. But when it comes to the off-road riding, when you start getting into the technical and difficult stuff, they're not so great. They're fine down a dirt road, but if you don't have any off-road skills at all, they really can be difficult to manage because of their weight, because of how much power they make, and they do have a lot of electronics on them, so it can be a lot to learn. So I would not recommend this if you are looking at getting into some serious off-road riding. So the second category is probably my favorite, and it's, in my opinion, the most versatile, and that's the dual sport. They sit in between the adventure bike and the enduro. They're the true 50-50 of the spectrum in my eyes. Now, they're usually single cylinders. They're often a lot lighter than adventure bikes. They don't have as much to brake on them, as they're very utilitarian. They're often not the best looking motorcycles, but they really can take some abuse. And I also think they're the best kind of bike for the person getting into the sport. If you're looking into getting off-road and you're thinking of spending some serious time in the dirt rather than on the road and a little bit of dirt, then I would heavily encourage you to get a dual sport straight away. As in learning to ride off-road, you will be dropping your bike, you will be crashing. The other great thing about a dual sport is they're the most versatile. You really can bolt any kind of accessory onto this bike and you can turn them into an adventure bike if that's the way you want to take it. Or you can get them very close to a basic enduro bike if that's the way you want to go. So if you're just getting into the sport, you've never ridden motorcycles before, or if you've never ridden off-road before, I think this is the best category for your entry into off-road riding. The third is the most dirt orientated, and that's the enduro bike. They're called that because they're used to race in endurance races. These are going to be the most hard-edged and powerful bikes off-road. They're also going to be the lightest. They really are fantastic for off-road. They're the most serious, the most capable of doing really gnarly terrain. The payoff though is that these require a lot of maintenance to look after. They're also very, very expensive usually. Enduro bikes, because of the high performance, you've got fantastic suspension, very highly strung motors, so cost comes along with performance. But if you're wanting the most capable off-road, you do like performance, you've got a bit of that thrill seeker in you and you love tackling technical terrain, then this is definitely the way you should go. So you've got yourself the bike now, you've figured out where you want to ride and you've figured out kind of what you're capable of. You can lose years of your life looking at all the accessories to turn every motorcycle you can think of into your dream unicorn motorcycle. I think there are only 2 accessories that you must have before you get off-road, because remember, this video is all about getting out there as quick as possible. There's plenty of accessories out there that you can worry about after you're already riding off-road. So the 2 major accessories I would encourage you to get before you get into the dirt are a pair of hand guards. These wrap around the bars to protect your brake lever and your clutch lever. You will drop your bike, and usually when you do that without the hand guards, those levers will snap. So those things will protect both your levers, but they'll also protect your fingers as well. The second accessory is a bash plate. A lot of motorcycles come with a plastic bash plate, so I would say that's fine, at least for when you're starting out. But I would look to replace that as I get into off-road riding more and more. If you don't have a bash plate, I would encourage you to get one before you get out there. So if you're not aware of what a bash plate is, it's basically a metal or carbon fiber plate or a plastic plate that goes underneath your engine and your frame to protect the bottom of the engine, that is the oil sump, as well as usually your water pump and your crankcases at the bottom of the engine there from heavy impacts into rocks and logs and when you drop the bike. So it really is very important. Those 2 things are the major accessories. The rest of the accessories, I would say, don't worry about them. Get into off-road riding, enjoy the experience, find out what you like with those 2 accessories, and once you know what kind of riding you are enjoying the most, you can start tailoring your accessories on the bike to suit your needs the most. So I've been riding quite a few years, and over those years I've got a lot of friends and family into motorcycle riding. And I've seen this mistake made 100 times, and that's you've got the bike, you've got the accessories, and you've left yourself absolutely no budget for the protective gear that you need to ride. And it's a common mistake, but I wanted to just highlight that you should set aside your budget when you're looking at a motorcycle. Don't spend everything on the bike. Think about the protective gear, as your body staying in one piece is as important as the motorcycle staying in one piece. So the first piece of gear is the most obvious one, and that's the helmet. Now you can use whatever helmet you like really to ride off-road. It isn't necessary that you get an off-road specific helmet. I've had friends that have been on tight budgets who already ride motorcycles on the road, and they just use their road helmet when they're first getting into the sport. It isn't ideal, but it can be done. Now you might be wondering, why do I need an off-road orientated helmet? Well, it's mostly due to airflow and how heavy the helmet is. So off-road helmets, the good ones, they usually focus on trying to be lighter weight, and they also let a lot more air through them. So you'll see big vents here, you'll see vents up here. You'll also see a visor here, so you'll let a lot of air flow through. That'll keep you cool, as riding off-road is a very physical exercise. But this visor here is not only good for keeping the sun out of your eyes, you can put your helmet down a bit and this will protect your face from all those rocks and sticks. Next up is a jacket. It really doesn't matter what jacket you get as long as it's a textile jacket. So don't get a leather jacket because that won't breathe enough for you off-road. Again, when you're thinking about off-road, how much airflow can I get through my riding gear, as you do get very hot. As I said, it's a very physical activity, so you need to think about being able to moderate your body temperature. So not only keeping lots of airflow through, but you need to be able to zip all that up and keep yourself warm as well. I would say get an adventure jacket. That is a mesh jacket, a textile jacket that has lots of vents that can open up to allow airflow through, but it will also have a rain liner in it as well, so you can keep dry if it does decide to chuck it down. The next item is pants. I would again encourage you either to get textile pants that maybe match the jacket you get. Again, they'll have lots of ventilation, they'll have lots of protection, both the jacket and the pants. Most people ride to the trails, so you don't need just protection for the trail, it needs to perform on the road as well. So this textile stuff has great abrasion resistance for when you're on the tarmac. Most of them come with a rain liner as well, so you'll stay dry if it decides to chuck it down. The second option is the option I did, which is the budget option. I was already riding a motorcycle and I had myself a pair of Kevlar jeans. So those are jeans with Kevlar material in them for abrasion resistance. So they don't allow as much air through them. So if you're riding in hotter weather, it's not quite as comfortable. And when it rained, I just bought a cheap $10 pair of rain pants that I pulled over the top. So the next thing on the list is very important, and that's gloves. There's really two ways you can go. You can either go off-road orientated gloves or road orientated gloves. Off-road gloves, the good thing about these is there's a lot of mesh on here which increases the breathability of the gloves, so they're very good in hot weather. They're not so great in cold weather. You will feel the cold. These don't keep the water out. Also, you can see that the material is quite thin. So in a crash, this isn't going to last very long on the road, and it doesn't offer any armor protection along here, because think about when you crash, you usually put your hands out. It's just natural instinct. So off-road gloves usually don't have the best protection. They're more about allowing lots of feeling through the gloves, because you need that dexterity for riding off-road, and about allowing a lot of airflow through to keep you cool while you're doing the physical activity. Now we move over to the road glove. Obviously you've got much better protection. You can see here all the armor. This is much better for when you hit the road. It's going to give you some impact protection. You can see the different layers of leather here, hopefully. You can see they got leather on top of leather. So you've got great abrasion resistance for when you're sliding along. Also the knuckle protection is much more serious, so is the finger protection, and down the sides as well. So the protection is much, much more, but you're also lacking breathability. These gloves are very warm. They're great for winter. They don't allow a lot of airflow through, so off-road you would get very, very sweaty. The other thing is, because they have all that armor and all that thick leather, the dexterity isn't very good, so it's very hard to get the same amount of feeling as you would out of this glove when you're on the bike. So my compromise is usually I have two pairs of gloves. I have this pair for when I ride to the dirt, and then I chuck a pair of gloves like this on when I get to the dirt. So the next gear accessory you need is boots. And I'm gonna say something controversial here, and that is get yourself a motocross boot, this big dirty pig of a thing here. Now, you might say, but I'm not doing any motocross or enduro riding. What you want off-road is the most amount of protection you can get for your money, and the motocross boot is what that is offered, or sometimes they're called enduro boots. But they offer far more protection than any other boot on the market. Forget about adventure boots or piddly little road boots like this one here. They just don't offer you sufficient protection for if you drop the bike on your legs. Now, why might this be controversial? Well, because when people who've never ridden off-road before put on these big, huge boots, they often feel very restrictive, and that's the point. They're not allowing your ankle or your lower leg to flex in any kind of way that can cause you injuries. So initially that can be quite hard to get used to. It's very hard to feel the pedals and the gear lever, so it is very off-putting for a new rider. But the boots do break in and you do get used to the feeling, and before you know it, you won't even notice they're there. but I encourage you to push through that learning curve because the MX boot just has so much more protection than any other boot. Even the adventure boots can't offer anything close to what the MX boot has. No, I'm not about to go and fight crime as a vigilante. This is the next item of gear, and this is the impact suit. So this is what you would wear under your jacket or under your motorcycle jersey. So it's got lots of protection on the elbows, on the arms, your chest, your shoulders, and your back. Take it from me, this is a most valuable piece of equipment. This has allowed me to fall off the bike without feeling anything hundreds of times. It really has kept me safe, and it's a must-have for riding off-road as it just takes some of the worry out of riding, as this is a much better option than the armor that comes in your jacket. I would suggest taking that armor out and getting one of these and wearing this instead. This will give you much more comprehensive protection than the crappy armor that comes in jackets. Now, not all jackets have bad armor. The problem is that the armor in those jackets, it moves with the jacket rather than with your body. Whereas this will be zipped up on my body, and wherever my arms and my torso move, so does the armor, so it's always where it needs to be to protect me the best. The next thing is a knee guard. Now they come in lots of different shapes and sizes, but this is another must-have item. So if you've just bought yourself textile pants and they have knee guards in them, it's the same thing as with the jacket and the impact suit. I would encourage you to get a specific knee guard. Something like this knee guard is CE rated for the road as well, so it's got very, very high levels of protection. Wherever you fall, that knee guard will be to protect you the most. The problem with those inserts in the pants is they shift around. They don't have to be as big and bulky and as intrusive as a knee guard like that. You can get smaller ones like this Fox one. Obviously, this doesn't offer nearly the same amount of protection. And I would actually encourage you, if you do have the budget, is get a proper knee brace if you are getting into enduro riding. If you're very serious about your off-road riding, get a knee brace, not a knee guard. But if you're just a regular off-road rider like myself, just get yourself some knee guards. They're very, very good and probably one of the best items for protecting you, as I can't count the amount of times I've come off, and it's usually your legs that hit the dirt first. Now we've talked about gear, it's time to get into tires. Now, I'm not going to tell you which tires to go for or what kind of balance you should look for. I'm just going to go through two important scenarios here. Now, if you've got an adventure bike and you've never ridden off-road before, I would encourage you to get rid of those tires straight away and put something more dirt capable on instead. If you have a dual sport or an enduro bike, I would encourage a different scenario. And this is what I did, and I had quite a lot of success with it, and I think it went quite well. So I kept the stock tires on my dual sport. They were adequate enough for me to learn off-road safely. And then when it came time to getting a new set of tires, I knew exactly what I was after, and I didn't have to waste any of my money in messing around trying to figure out what kinds of tires I needed. It also allowed me to get out there straight away without having to have another expense. And when I did get out there riding off-road, I just borrowed my mates' bikes while we're out there riding, and they tended to have lots of different kinds of tires on their bikes. And that way I was able to learn what kind of tires I really wanted next. Let's go through the tools. And if you could only have one tool with you, I would pick a multi-tool. So that's one of these. This is a Leatherman, so it's a little more of the more expensive kind, but whatever you want to get, doesn't matter. This is just fantastic, but they're an absolute lifesaver, and it's all about having something that can do multiple jobs on a bike because you're worrying about weight. So this keeps weight down, being able to do so many different things in a small package. I would absolutely encourage you to at least carry a multi-tool with you when you're going to ride off-road or on your big long adventures. You never know when these things will come in handy. The next thing is a spare tube. Now this bag looks a bit ratty. That's because it's lots of years old and all the red dust here in Australia, you can see. So this is actually a bag that goes on the front fender of my motorcycle, but it holds in it a 21-inch tube, and that's because the front tire on my dual sport is a 21-inch wheel. Now why a 21-inch and not say a 17-inch for the rear, or an 18-inch, whatever your rear wheel is. The reason for this is because a 21-inch tube, being that it's a big tube, can actually fit on the smaller diameter rear rim. Now the rear tube cannot fit on the front, so the front tube can actually do the front and the back. Now it isn't ideal on the back, and it would only get you out of the trails. I would change it as soon as I got home, but it will get you out of the trouble. Now the other way around, you just can't put the smaller diameter tube on the bigger diameter wheels. If you can't carry a tube with you, or if you do carry a tube, I would encourage you to also take a patch kit. This is a very small basic one, and this basically has all the stuff in it to patch over a hole in your tube. Now obviously if you've got a bigger adventure bike, that would be a plug kit. I would encourage you to take one of those tire repair kits that you can get. So the other must-have, I think, for going out off-road is taking a tire iron with you. I take 3. Some people say you only need 2. Having changed a tire before, I can say that it is far easier with 3 if you have the room to take it on there, but it isn't exactly necessary. You can do it with 2. It's just much easier with 3. But what I would do if you are getting tire irons is get one like this. It's a spanner and it's a tire iron. So when you're off-road riding, like I said before, whenever you're getting a tool or a piece of gear, ask yourself, can it do more than one job? Sticking with the tires, I would also say a tire gauge is a pretty big necessity when riding off-road. Being able to tell what pressures are in your tires is very important, as when you're riding off-road you need to reduce the pressures in your tires depending on the terrain you do, and then you need to pump them back up to adequate pressures when you hit the roads. So sticking with the tires, I usually take one of these. It's a little dicky hand pump, commonly used for bicycles, although I will point out if you're getting one of these, make sure it has an adjustable fitting up here, because using this, there we go, the focus is in. Using this, you need a different fitting for the motorcycle valve compared to a bicycle valve, so make sure it has the fitting that will fit a motorcycle. But obviously you can see this is very small, this is very compact. Might not be so great if you've got an adventure bike, but for a dual sport or an enduro where you've got lower pressures and smaller diameter tires, this will suffice in getting the tires up to the needed pressure. Now in saying that, if you do have to change a tire, or you do have an adventure bike, or maybe you just don't like furiously pumping away like a 13-year-old that's just discovered their first porno magazine, you can always use a little mini compressor. So this I take with me on big adventure rides. So this just makes life easier, being able to self-inflate the tires. It also makes being able to bead the tire after a tube replacement that much easier. It just takes some of the hassle out. It's still quite compact, very light, as you can see next to my hand here. It's still very small, so this will just plug straight into a cigarette lighter or directly to your battery and job done. The other option that I don't have an example of is the little CO2 air canisters that screw straight into your valve. That's another way of taking some air with you, probably the least amount of effort, but you do have to take a few to get the pressures up, especially if you've got a bigger bike. I really think that's only an option if you've got maybe an enduro bike and you're used to running quite low pressures, but that is an option that I wanted to point out. The other must-have tool I would say that's almost as important as the multi-tool is the good old cable tie. I can't tell you how many times these little buggers have saved my life. I would also throw duct tape in there as well. So the next section is personal safety. This one also gets overlooked in the rush to get out there, and it's a fairly easy fix really. And the first item on the safety list is just a little first aid kit. It doesn't have to be much. This one I've actually taken apart and I've thrown things in there that better suit my needs and motorcycle riding. At some point in time, you're either going to need to patch yourself or a friend back together. The next item on the list I'm actually going to leave on the wall there, and that's a hydration pack. You should always have water with you, and I think a hydration pack is probably the best way of doing that, and it also gives you a way of carrying some food and your tools for the day, and you don't have to worry about having to get bags or racks on your bike. It really does do two jobs, so get yourself a hydration pack. Next up with safety, we have an emergency beacon, sometimes called an EPIRB. You also might have heard of a spot tracker, and even some GPSs like my Garmin 66i here. It has an SOS function on it. If the camera would just focus, there you go. So if I flick this off, I can hit that button and it lets emergency services know that I'm in trouble and they can send someone out to get me. So from safety, we move into navigation. Seems that I've already displayed the GPS. You have a few options with navigation. Now you can go the good old mobile phone. This is the easiest and quickest way to get into it. And this is what I would recommend, as most people are going to have a smartphone already. So you can just download a GPS app, whether it's Motion X, Mud Maps, whatever it is, download it, and you can actually use that GPS function without the phone having reception to a mobile phone tower. So you can be out of reception range and still use these GPS programs. So it is a fantastic budget option. That's another way you can do it. Just get a hard map. It won't run out of batteries, and you can use that to work your way around if you like rolling old school. Now, if you really are serious about the off-road riding, you can splurge and get yourself a GPS, but it isn't a necessity. So I'd say use your phone for the first bit and then try and clue yourself into what kind of navigation you actually want as you learn to ride. So you've just waded through all that information and you're now ready to ride off-road, but you've just realized that I don't have anyone to ride with and I don't know where to actually ride. Find yourself a local riding group. So whether that be Facebook groups, which are fantastic for this, or maybe go to adventurerider.com, and in Adventure Riders forums, they have country and state specific riding groups, and these groups you can go along to. You meet like-minded people, so you're making friends and you're learning where to ride. And these people will hold beginner rides that are really tailored to the first-time rider. So not only will you have people that are like-minded, but they'll be very understanding and they'll be more than willing to give you tips and help you out. I would say use the power of social media to your advantage here and find some like-minded people and get out that way. And that's how you'll not only find where to ride, but who to ride with. So we've made it to the end of this video. Finally, I hear some of you say. I hope that's helped. Please smash that like button if you've liked this video. Share it around with your family and friends that are looking to get into the sport. As always, guys, I've been Chronicles of Solid. Don't forget to get out there now that you've got all the information. Get on your bike and have a great time. And I'll see you in the next video. Catch you later.